Look, sometimes you just want to play a normal, inoffensive little game for your YouTube channel. But that's not the type of game I stumbled across. My name is Harvey Bodega, and welcome to Desert Law. Desert Law, or
Койоты. Закон пустыни.
is a vehicular combat real-time strategy game developed by Belarusian studio Arise, released in 2005. Using a modified version of Nivel Interactive's Blitzkrieg engine, load and unload units from Mad Max-styled post-apocalyptic battle vehicles to defeat your enemies. Each of the 29 missions contains visual novel-style dialogue and is sandwiched between comic-style cutscenes. In a post-apocalypse southern United States where gasoline is the new currency, our protagonist, Brad's girlfriend, Jane, is captured by an opposing gang, and Brad vows to get her back. While seeming cliché at first, rushed development, muddled translation, uncertain intent, tonal whiplash, and edgy subject matter make this narrative anything but normal. It won't look abnormal at first, as environments are well-realized 2D wastelands like the isometric Fallouts. By 2005, most RTSs had fully transitioned to 3D worlds, but those 3D environments haven't aged as well. I mean, Desert Law is mostly barren and reuses a lot of assets, but look at this house. It's great. I mean, it looks like shit, but good shit. Vehicles have a similar level of detail and a huge variety, ranging from motor tricycles, go-karts with cannons, military vehicles, to full artillery pieces, and can destroy a lot in the environments, always a welcome feature. Units, on the other hand, look barely more detailed than Rollercoaster Tycoon's guests and have low variety. The hero units are mostly recognizable, and the character design, while many look normal, has some creativity on display. We'll talk about that later. During missions, characters will speak with a portrait image, which are serviceable. I wish they had more of them, as they constantly reuse minor characters like I'm in a Mike Myers movie, and hero portraits would benefit from multiple for different emotions. No, Chief, Father, please don't die. Hey, how you doing? So the portraits and comic book cutscenes I'd summarize as just okay. Animations are solid, they're not complex but have character, full-scale combat feels intense, and the one animated cutscene is impressive. On the audio side, the effects, either environmental or specific, range from terribly stock and goofy, to stock and totally average, to stock but powerful and satisfying, averaging out to subpar, I'd say. The soundtrack, however, composed by now seemingly defunct Strategic Music Company out of St. Petersburg, gives Desert Law a funky, hyped, intense soundtrack. It's really catchy, and I never got sick of the 10 tracks even though they're spread out throughout a 25-hour game. Lastly, voice acting is lacking completely, but the comics have a cadence as if they're accommodating a voiceover, and that's because they are.
Радости? Радости. Боня, иди сюда, радость ты наша. Старенький я. Стар, говоришь?
Дай-ка я на тебя взгляну, красавчик.
It's pretty good, but I'm playing the GOG version in English, and the Russian voice acting is locked in the files. Maybe I'm a dingus, but I couldn't figure out how to add it with English text. But either way, English speakers, this is all we've got natively. Overall, the audio is slightly below average, comprised of subpar effects, catchy music, and decent but unavailable voice acting, which builds on a generally serviceable visual presentation. On to the gameplay, and as with any RTS, the first area to worry about is the movement. How's the pathfinding? Are there stances? How responsive is everything? To summarize, it's not good. I can't avoid coming out of the gate like this because movement is a chronic problem. There are few stances and only two types of movement. Direct move, which ignores enemies, and attack move, automatically aggroing on any enemies in the path. Like any attacking, attack move is limited by detection radius and line of sight, which is dynamic and can be blocked by stuff in the way, kind of like Darkwood. Units outside vehicles have the same options except for heroes who can stealth crawl incredibly slowly, and Brad has binoculars to see further in a specific cone. Lastly, other than a few special bonuses, is holding right-click to move units in their current formation, something I tried to use a lot. Yes, tried, but pathfinding almost always made this difficult. In an open, barren environment, these issues are mostly hidden until your units group, comically bungling around each other like that truck mobile game. Other times, units fail to recognize barriers. I click to go to the other side of this canyon. It's horrible. I'm getting attacked, my vehicle always seems to be facing the wrong direction. Tying that with terrible pathfinding results in a lot of frustration, made worse by destroyed vehicles remaining as blown-out husks. Big battles leave an obstacle course that just may not be possible until the husks eventually despawn. With all of this nonsense, it's easy for a hero to get picked off, and if they do, it's back to the beginning for you, so save frequently within missions. Yes, all of this is bad, but maybe most frustrating is units just don't listen to you sometimes. Look at this, he's just ignoring me. I played Desert Law like a tactics game or Dragon Age, pausing frequently, issuing commands, then unpausing to see which units would follow them. Of course, sometimes they'd just be stuck, and you'd almost have to give them some space for them to figure it out on their own. We've all been there. While it's admittedly not the worst movement system I've seen in RTS, it's bad, especially for 2005. Let me talk about something I liked, the combat. It's like we got a Fury Road RTS 10 years before that movie came out. Fights are visceral, leaving a graveyard of vehicles and craters, though you've probably noticed Desert Law has no running and gunning. You drive to a spot, stop, and attack. The most overpowered strategy on missions that allow it is advance slowly with long vision and pick off enemies with artillery. The AI just can't handle it. That's not possible on all missions, as some require big engagements though, and involve managing enemy focus, maintaining sightlines, and retreating low-health vehicles. I found myself having to think strategically on a few levels and almost always found full-scale engagements fun, again as long as my units weren't stuck. Each of the 29 missions has different objectives, varying from straightforward and interesting, to tedious, to terribly contrived. Mission 3, for instance, has you going to the left corner, then the bottom corner, then the center, then the bottom corner again, then the center, then the right corner, then center, then left corner again, finishing sort of top right. Unfortunately, there are a few tedious stealth levels, but I did have a favorite in the defense missions. I'll say again, I like the combat, but it's hard to ignore how terrible the movement is. This would land me on the negative side of neutral, but built on top of this, the performance can have you pulling your hair out. I'm going to try to look past all the pathfinding bugs, which got steadily worse, but there's some terrible lag, improperly coded enemy AI, vision bugs and crashes. Mission 27 had one of the most game-breaking bugs I've ever had. An objective trigger misfired, constantly pausing and unpausing my game, dialogue kept reappearing, the frame rate plummeted, the victory condition wouldn't trigger, and I had an extremely hard crash, which required restarting my computer. So I can try to like the combat, but enough is dragging it down to where I'd summarize the overall gameplay as disagreeable. Frustrating and poorly implemented mechanics is a death warrant to almost every RTS, but Desert Law can partially escape that condemnation because of an emphasis on story. I mean, that doesn't make the gameplay any better, but it does give you more to play for. Can I tell you a secret? Don't judge me now, this is between you and me and the contemptuous expanse of the internet. I've never cared much for campaigns in RTS games. I know, there's some great ones, Dark Crusade for instance, but I don't like mucking about with William Wallace in Age of Empires. I'd rather get my ass kicked in the sandbox skirmish or multiplayer modes. Since it only has a campaign, I thought Desert Law gave me a chance to right that wrong, but after playing, I feel like I'm the one who's been wronged. I want everyone to be able to enjoy this video, and I figured that the best way to do that was to offer a little bit of a warning. Very little is actually depicted, but there are some strange, bad taste and tactless things that just happen to you in this plot. There are some rather insensitive discussions and implications around the topic of sexual violence, so if that is something you're sensitive to, go ahead and jump to the time on screen now, which is after the story section, and you can just hear the finishing thoughts and my conclusion. Let's start at the beginning. I want to show you the first 4 cutscenes as I experienced them. Our intrepid journey starts with 2 guys approaching a school bus bar with a turret, trying to wake up a Brad to go see someone named the Old Man. They speculate Brad is probably in a hungover post-coital daze from celebrating something called Fertility Day with a woman named Bonnie. Opening up the bus, Brad doesn't even remember who he is, but the 2 wake him up and take him to see a large Asian man with an umbrella hat and a blonde woman sitting in his lap, who instructs the guys to go look for gangsters and something else covered by the UI. Brad agrees, gives Chief, not Old Man apparently, the ball gazer symbol, and that leads into the tutorial. I already have a lot of questions. Who are the other people in the bus? Who are the 2 wakers? And why does one look like a Nazi? Well, after the hand-holdy tutorial, we're back at the school bus bar with a bunch of people. Brad wastes no time in harassing a woman. "Hello, pretty, what's your name, sweet lips?" "She definitely likes me." Her understandable response is, "Get lost, keep your hands to yourself, redneck." "She positively likes me." "Come on, let me hug you, beautiful." The reply, "All right, I'm losing my patience. Back off before I taught you some kung fu." Oof. Well, Chief tells Brad to leave the girl alone and chastises him for his macho habits, saying something cut off by the UI and sending him on a recon mission to a canyon. Brad's mind is on other things. Maybe after all, she doesn't like me that much. So he tries to smooth things over. Man, cut your losses while you're behind. Well, this is Jane, and apparently she's into him. We clear out some gangsters, and Brad returns to the school bus bar being closed down by a one-armed guy named Kyle, one of the people he had been sleeping next to. He's going to go get more alcohol, but Brad's two neurons get quickly distracted as he notices Jane. "Hey, listen, I'm sorry. I didn't want to be impolite." "No prob. I didn't mean to be impolite myself. I guess I'm not used to your acquainting habits here yet." "No, I mean, sorry, really, my bad, but I thought maybe it was fate?" "Okay. Please, Jane, for me, for women everywhere. Don't go for this." Well, they're interrupted by Bonnie as Kyle is leaving, telling Brad to jump aboard as they just celebrated Fertility Day together the previous night. Brad says not this time, and turning back to Jane, he pulls this line. "This felt like I was touched by the gods and they gave me a sign." And I'm pained to say it, but Jane replies, "Yes, I felt that too." The following day, Chief and his girlfriend show up and ask if Brad would go meet Kyle, with the first of many mentions of a Dipus. I had to Google this one. A Dipus is the genus of the northern three-toed jerboa, and they're mentioned a lot. Well, Brad forgot he's meant to do that, so he goes to quickly depart, telling Jane he'll be back soon. Chief comments that they seem a nice couple. Last mission and cutscene prior to us taking a break and trying to understand what the hell is going on. I talked about Mission 3 already. It's the heavily contrived one where you have to run all over the map, but there's a lot of weirdness to it. We have the Nazi guy in our party. His name is Snotter. The African-American guy is Matthew. Kyle and Bonnie become playable later in the mission. And of course, we have Brad. Except in the mission updates, he's Bread. Snotter is Snifer, probably meant to be Sniffer. And the first time I played this mission, I went southeast and was attacked by never-explained zombies. Anyway, they go to find Kyle and Bonnie having an incredibly long dialogue exchange that can be summarized as Dipus references, and Kyle being a terrible alcoholic who needs his bus repaired. A mechanic named Mikos owes him a favor, so go get the mechanic to repair the bus and get out of there. Skipping over all the contrived nonsense, including convincing a man to help you by evoking the spirit of his grandmother, the bus is repaired and Mikos joins the group. You win the level, but Snotter has somehow heard the village is under attack. I didn't know there was a village, but a leather-clad group of gangsters is attacking where Chief is, and a specific guy with a mohawk, who will learn is named Joker, kills Chief. Next, he orders Jane be captured, and two other goons shoot Chief's girlfriend. Joker then congratulates his gang, saying, "These guys do a great job. Real teamwork." I'm going to stop here. Now that we've met almost all major characters, let's unpack, checking the manual for additional context. Kyle seems most like what a post-apocalyptic person would be. Alcoholic, one-armed, 52 years old but looks 70. He lives with Bonnie, owns the school bus bar, and knows how to read. Brad, or Bread, looks like Kevin Costner from Waterworld and is the leader of the gang. He also knows how to read and is, quote, well-built, but prefers to stand out by his intellect, and is also a bit crusty. Matthew's pretty well designed, the lieutenant of the gang who, quote, would chew bathroom glasses and rip out tires if the bet is good. I don't know what this means. Mikos, is the only person that looks like a complete cartoon, can read, and is a brilliant mechanic. This brings us to Bonnie and Jane. I think there is absolutely a place in media for well-written female characters designed with sexiness in mind. Wonder Woman, Jessica Rabbit. And I think we've all agreed as a society that we want Bayonetta to step on us. Sexuality just for titillation purposes comes off as grimy or very out of place. Desert Law is supposed to be a grounded setting, so how am I supposed to take the setting seriously when literally every woman dresses like this? It would make sense if it was just Bonnie, but we'll talk about that in a second. It's dumb, and maybe I'm a square, but my first thought seeing Jane is that she better use a hell of a lot of sunscreen. Let's get into their manual info. Jane is apparently Bread's girlfriend, although not exactly sure when that happened. No ability to read is listed, but her bust size is. Bonnie apparently doesn't have a name, as Bonnie is her nickname, described as a bar beauty. Infamous for her humongous breast size and friendship with Kyle. Always out there for new sensations, knows how to read. There is so much here that I'm just going to move on, as that completes our set of 7 hero characters. What? That wasn't 7? It says right here in the manual there are 7, but now that you mention it, there's only 6 with this inconspicuous space. Who's missing? Alright, this guy. Surely they didn't make a character who's canonically a Nazi, right? Why list who can read, which is everyone except for Matthew and Jane? This has no gameplay implications, so why is it here? Despite all of my questions, the most pressing one I have is what kind of story is this meant to be? We're meant to think Brad is badass, it's meant to be funny, and the post-apocalypse here is meant to be gritty. But so far, Brad comes off like a lizard brain, the translation makes mostly what an alcoholic and boys will be boys jokes just very confusingly, and while I appreciate a gritty setting, combining muddled humor with dark implications had me thrown for a massive loop. I have no idea what to expect, and this is just the beginning. I promise, I'll move through levels much faster from this point on, but I'll make sure to highlight some of the weird shit. Okay, the group, now called the Coyote Gang, goes back to the village where Jane is missing and Chief is murdered. Joker gets away and the Coyotes vow vengeance while acknowledging they need more firepower. Thankfully, Mikos knows of a post-apocalypse Mad Max vehicle factory who should be willing to give some up. Very convenient. Oh shit, is that a motherfucking Dipus reference? They ride off to the factory which, even more conveniently, is under attack, so the Coyotes negotiate saving the factory in exchange for some ordnance. After repelling a few waves, the director, who sort of looks like a prophet or something, says if only they had more manpower, but the biker gang to the south would never help them. The Coyote solution is to just send Bonnie. She rolls up, what a nice pair of eyes, and goes into an RV with the biker leader. Boom, that's all it took, back to the factory. Let's go to war, wieners, and kill the rest of the attackers. The factory director is happy to give them the vehicles, but now the Coyotes want gas too. The director says no, Brad threatens to kill him, it seems we're at an impasse. How can we convince him to give up his gasoline? Well, Bonnie. It works and the gang moves on. Matthew is missing, the gang threatens another old man, Matthew shows up late because he found a village of all women and had a lot of sex, Dipus reference. We get a cutscene of Joker's gang ahead of the Coyotes where they're watching a bunch of women dance, and Joker's reference to the women is my favorite mistranslated line in the whole game. You ready for this? Their lack of gray matter does not cancel the fact that they are devilishly seductive. Meanwhile, warning for massive tonal whiplash and depraved implications, one of the women propositions a guy named Marco who says, no, I want the blonde. Surely, they won't go there in this funny post-apocalypse game, right? Well, it certainly looks like it will for a moment, but absolutely cartoonishly, Jane pulls a look over there distraction and kills him. Why is Marco being treated like one of the goons from 101 Dalmatians? The tone is so all over the place, and I don't know what they're going for here, but I'm scared, okay? Jane tries to escape via our first stealth mission, and it's boring and slow, but feels she can't leave her fellow prisoners behind. Deciding to blow up a fuel truck as a distraction, Jane goes to steal explosives, blows up the truck, shoots the guard, and releases one prisoner. This guy says in veiled language that he doesn't want to live because they cut his penis off, and he'll happily be a sacrificial distraction so Jane can escape. Jane is like, are you sure? And he replies, it's not life. And ever empathetic, Jane replies, but I do manage somehow. Anyway, she escapes, and in my game at least, our eunuch friend didn't die. Back at the Coyote Gang, there's some old man mumbling to himself. Brad says something covered by the UI, but they're trying to get gas from this guy. He offers one cistern, to which Brad raises an eyebrow and asks, have the gangsters hit you on the head too many times? And the old man replies, all right, 2 cisterns. Who is this guy? Did Brad just flirt with him? Whatever it was, it worked, but they're back looking for more gasoline in the following mission. It really feels like they've only hunted for gas since Jane's departure, but now is her glorious reunion. The whole gang is fired up at Jane's return, reinvigorated, or maybe reminded, of their hunt for Joker. They set off to attack more gangsters and come across a guy that looks like this. Jane, ever sensitive, comments, oh, his face looks like an ass. Good for me, I haven't called on him then. While Matthew says the guy looks like his brother that his dad dropped down a well, and Snotter adds, now I understand why the gangsters leave him be. I wouldn't kill him either. I'm a believer, you know. So my general thought is, what's happening here? But then Assface, whose name is Bum, snaps back at Snotter and my mouth literally fell open. Hey, shut it, you, Nazi punk. He is a Nazi, but why would they make a Nazi character? He doesn't seem to support that ideology. He's just as much of an asshole as everyone else, so why did they make him a Nazi? It's so stupid. While they kill more gangsters, discover that Joker had a specially modified car which Mikos can now reverse engineer, and capture one of the devilishly seductive women from Joker's gang. She calls Matthew stinky, who responds by shooting a bunch of people. Jane is horrified, but Snotter runs up and says the neighboring village is under attack, and more importantly, they have a lot of gas. So the coyotes set off to heroically defend another village, only to, again, try to rob them for gasoline. This time, the village stands up to them, and the coyotes seek vengeance. Let's teach them how to rob honest brigands. The violence, understandably, is too much for Jane and she bails, which doesn't concern Brad in the slightest. Anyway, they win and kill the village elder for his gas. Bonnie shows up and embraces Snotter, now having embraced every man in the gang, and Matthew and Brad discuss the next steps in pursuing Joker. Prior to breaking for spoilers and unpacking a bit more, I'll show the second half of this cutscene. But let's play What Happens Next with Harvey Bodega, the segment where you guess what the hell is about to happen. Here comes our answer choices. Will A. Snotter reveal himself to be a double agent? B. Cuba invade the United States? C. Kyle's bar suddenly explode? Or D. Brad and Matthew get into a fatal fistfight? Everybody ready? Got their answer choices selected? The choice is B. Cuba invades the United States. While I find it fitting that all this bullshit is taking place in Florida, Cuba invades, declaring it the Free Socialist Arizona. As much as I wasn't enjoying much of the experience, I had to know what kind of game this was and where they were going. Cuba invading, a rift in the gang, vengeance on Joker. I think we're meant to feel the coyotes are badass, but wow, everyone sucks. Brad, Snotter, and Matthew are all violent, dangerous, unpredictable menaces. Jane seems to have her head on the straightest, just with terrible taste in men, but I'm happy there's someone in the story being like, yeah, this is terrible. I don't mind Kyle, he's sort of in a drunken daze the whole time, but my favorite character is Bonnie. I like the plot point that she's so irresistible that she can persuade any man to do anything, and it makes her outfit make more sense. She also has terrible taste in men, but she's just out there for the experience and treats everyone well. In a true neutral to downright chaotic evil gang, the neutral good-aligned Bonnie seems the purest and truest to herself. What I'm hoping is that Cuba and Joker's gang team up against the coyotes, only for Jane to sweep in and rescue Kyle and Bonnie while the other two fight it out until the end. We'll see. Here's the time code for spoilers. Jump forward to the time on screen now for the opportunity to experience the rest of this plot on your own, and only hear my finishing thoughts. Right. Cuba invades, and Joker and his partner waste no time in signing up with them. Jane begins helping locals to create a following of her own, and Brad and the coyotes continue their violence to collect more gas. We have reused portraits, Matthew is tripping on cactus and makes a Britney Spears reference, and the coyotes do their trademark defense and robbery. Joker and the Cubans, led by General Merjeja, now have it out for the coyotes. They attack the village the coyotes were robbing in massive numbers, and Brad suddenly has a sense of duty to defend these people. Matthew and Snotter, called Snifer in this cutscene, destroy his vehicle and leave him behind. Remember how he looks lying here. It'll be important later. Cut to Jane. She's stealthing around with the help of bikers to rescue Brad, who apparently off-screen was captured. I'm thinking here, Jane, my girl, who can do so much better, but thankfully she justifies her interest. Finding a normal guy in the desert is a huge problem. You know what? That's fair. I can't judge her for that. So Jane marches directly into the enemy camp, bluffing that she mined their fuel supply. They don't believe her, but the fuel explodes anyway, which confuses even them. Brad calls someone an abortion victim and they escape, but look at the following cutscene. Brad is lying here in the desert, and Jane finds him and takes him back to her new base. I think I'd be right in assuming they added an extra level here, and now we have 3 factions. The Cubans and Joker, the remaining coyotes, and Jane and Brad. Jane and Brad embarked to steal more vehicles by helping someone named Garbage Man, who was kicked out of his previous game for being politically correct. We see Joker and his partner in trouble with the Cubans for failing to kill Brad, while Bonnie and Kyle split off from the rest of the coyotes, apparently because of Snifer. We follow our now 4th faction of Kyle and Bonnie as they enter a cool-looking city for my least favorite mission other than the upcoming one that just broke my game. It's hard to summarize. Kyle goes and sees an old contact, Bonnie gets captured, then freed, convinces a man's nephew that converted to Satanism to return home. I'm a goon man. And they eventually leave to reunite with Jane and Brad. Jane is mean to Bonnie and instantly jumps into bed with Brad before they all set off to fight more Cubans. A village is under attack and Brad is back to his old form because he just couldn't give a shit, but they help anyway, recruiting the locals here and in the following mission, where they meet the president. Weird he looks exactly like someone earlier in the game, but that's cool. Now that they have more people, they now need more vehicles, so they set off to explore an abandoned military base. To find it, they go to a military base to find the other military base, and we speak to Bond, Jim Bond, who is also referred to as a Nazi. They learn the other military base has a tank. Brad knows how to drive it because he read Tanks for Dummies, so he and Jane break in and steal it. Snotter and Matthew are riding around looking for booze and chicks, but notice Brad's base where Kyle and Bonnie are hiding out. The remainder of the coyotes attack the base, and after being repelled, Snotter tries to join the Cuban side, bartering with knowledge of Brad's base location. I haven't talked about her, but Mirjeha also has a comically half-naked right-hand woman, to which Snotter provides the location. Mirjeha commands an attack on Brad's base and orders to hang Snotter as once a traitor, always a traitor. I thought this was a great and fitting end for him, but just ignore the sombrero soldiers. Anyway, Brad and Jane show up just in time to protect the base against the Cuban attack in their new tank, which excites Bonnie to see. If that tank was, a man, he'd be my prince. The defense is successful with assistance from the president. The Cuban woman was left behind. Brad infiltrates the Cuban base to find where Mirjeha is. Here's where my game broke. And Brad captures Joker's partner. Jane immediately gets jealous of her, but she tells them where Mirjeha is hiding. Okay, second last level. The gang captures some artillery and now talks about repelling communists and starting their own country. I didn't know that was the motivation, but we're to the final level and you aren't ready. United, except without Jane, the gang attacks the Cubans. It's a difficult mission even with allies showing up to help, but eventually they kill what was allegedly Mirjeha's vehicle. Psych, that was a fake. Mirjeha is in some huge thing threatening a nuclear strike unless Brad gives himself up. I mean, I'm fine with that, but Jane shows up and blows herself and Mirjeha up to save Brad. The Cubans are defeated, everyone is celebrating, and Brad is sad for about 3 panels as Joker's partner comes up to seduce him. Don't be sad, Brad. It is also advisable to switch gals every once in a while. Whatever. Brad says he should go to the Great Lakes for some rest and relaxation, to which Marticia, which we now learn her name is, asks to join. On their way out, Bonnie, the Cuban woman, and several other random women also join him. Our narrative ends on Jane being entirely forgotten and Brad saying, "Life is peachy." Playing an RTS built completely around a story is relatively new for me, but I have to ask, is this the story they really wanted to tell? 80% of the missions can be summarized as get gas, guns, or recruits, hung on a framework of a bad story. I'll take the most charitable perspective I can, assuming that most of the humor is funny in its original language, especially with voice acting, and according to Moby Games, Desert Law got a special edition the following year, released only in a few countries in Central Europe. Maybe it cleared up a lot of bugs, runs better, etc., but all I can grade is the 1.0.0 version available on GOG. Despite these charitable concessions, the story is still muddled and incomplete. What happened to Joker? What happened to Matthew? Who blew up the gas tanks when Jane rescued Brad? There's a huge emphasis on irreverence, a nice way of saying edginess, doing controversial things just to do them, but I'm almost certain this game was reworked to tone it down later in development. Snotter was almost certainly meant to be in the manual. Clearly the plot was shuffled and expanded, and many things left unresolved. So in welcoming back our spoiler avoiders, I'll say in the best of circumstances, a likely censored, reworked, and badly localized story is unlikely to be excellent, and Desert Law's narrative is more an exercise in edgy unexpectedness than anything of quality. What an experience. Desert Law is an edgy, immature, and poorly optimized real-time strategy game. Like I was saying about sexualized female characters, I believe there are ways to write irreverence well, or at least better. Harvester, for instance, is a clever critique of video game censorship, but being controversial for the joy you'd get out of angering pearl clutchers or rebelling against censorship rules ages terribly and comes off like an angsty 5th grader etching a swastika into a bathroom stall. Like, you're being childish. Just stop. It doesn't help that the performance suffers greatly in the second half, the campaign is too long for too little, and the gameplay is below average. So as for a recommendation in scoring Desert Law in each of my categories, we find it between Hinterland and Monsters Dead and Godfall, achieving the second title in my category I do not recommend. I just don't recommend it, even if RTSs or edgy games are your thing. Maybe if you were an ultra-interested Russian speaker, you might get more out of it than I did, but I still can't recommend it. Despite my lack of affection for the title, I can't help but admit really enjoying telling you all about it. Like, don't play it, but there was a battered joy in experiencing something so bizarre. It wasn't fun, but at the very least, this video was a lot of fun to make. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. My name is Harvey Bodega, and I'll see you around. I hope all is well. Thanks a lot.